Welcome to the Natural Super Kids podcast, where you will discover practical strategies to inspire you to boost the health and nutrition of your kids. I'm Jessica Donovan, a qualified naturopath specialising in kids' health, and I want to make it as easy as possible for you to raise healthy and happy kids. Let's get into it. Hello and welcome to the Natural Super Kids podcast. Jessica Donovan here. I am so excited to bring you this conversation that I've had with Gen Muir from Connected Parenting. And it's all about navigating kids' big feelings and how we can stay connected to our kids as parents, especially through those tricky times. So Jen is a parent educator, an author, a social worker, and she's a mum of 4 boys. She's passionate about helping families to connect and thrive amid the many challenges of modern parenting. So Jen's got a book and she's also got a podcast. So her recent book is called Big People, Little Feelings, and she co-hosts the podcast Beyond the Chaos. I'm sure some of you listen to that podcast. And in Beyond the Chaos, that her and her co-host provide valuable resources for those working with or raising children. So we'll make sure the links to Jen's book and podcast are in the show notes. And Jen and I have such a great conversation. I always love these parenting topics because I feel like I get so much value out of chatting to these parent experts myself. So we talk about parenting in general, why parenting feels so hard these days, why it's so important to really focus on connection in parenting. And we talk through some of the biggest struggles that parents have and how to deal with them, the meltdowns, the bedtime struggles, the fussy eating, and so much more. So I'm going to hand it over to Jen. Welcome to the Natural Super Kids podcast, Jen. It's so good to have you here.
I'm happy to be here.
I'm really looking forward to this conversation. I love the parenting conversations for selfish reasons.
Yeah.
We all need all the reminders. So do you want to start by telling us a little bit about yourself and how you came to be doing the work that you do?
Yes, I'd love to. So I'm a mum to 4 boys. I'm a social worker. So I've been a social worker for a very, very long time. And I'd worked in lots of areas in social work, and I kept finding that a lot of the problems we sort of see in the world, I'd worked in mental health, domestic violence, law, but a lot of the problems we see within the world, a lot of what could prevent those problems happens in the first 5 years. Or the first 8 years, really. So I developed a really strong interest in that. Then I had my own kids, but never had an intention of becoming a parent educator or writing a book. That was all just something that kind of happened backwards. But I found myself in a different social work role in a maternity unit, and I was doing their parent education, so helping people adjust to their first, second, third or fourth baby. I was doing a little bit of bereavement work in that space as well. And I just started to absolutely love the parent ed aspect. And I found that parents were sort of coming up to me and saying, do you have a website, do you have a book? And I was like, no, maybe I should write one. And so that all kind of happened. But really, I've had a lifelong passion and interest in what makes a family tick, what makes a family go well. But it was always a very personal one. It was around how I raised my kids. And I think also I thought as a young mum that because I was so well read, because I was so well kind of focused on it, because I was a social worker and the daughter of a therapist, I would be the world's most amazing award-winning mum. But I found myself, just like every mum, brought to my knees by the meltdowns and the behaviours of my first and second little boys, and really kind of realising in that way we often do, it's much easier to be the parent you want to be before you've had kids.
Yes.
And that struggle, I think, like a lot of my work comes from my own struggle, not from a story of being a perfect parent.
Yes, I love it. Thank you for sharing that. And I think we can all resonate with the maybe a bit of judgment that we've made
Yep.
before we become parents. Like, I'm never going to let my kids zoom around the supermarket like that. Or, yeah, well, that changes once you've got.
My kids won't. I won't bribe, and I won't use
Yes. Oh, so true. So, like, obviously, parenting, I feel like parenting has changed so much in a generation. Like, the way we're parenting our kids is totally different to the way that we were parented. So, why does parenting feel so hard, do you think, these days? And how can we make it feel lighter and easier? Because I know that's what you help a lot of parents with.
My gosh, that's a huge question. Okay. I absolutely, like, it's one of my passion areas. Is parenting definitely is feeling harder these days. And I would almost break it up into, there's the fact that all of us who are currently parenting kids, we are not parenting our kids in the same world our parents did. So it's all about more and less. There is more information than there's ever been. From your very first scan in 3D, you know more about your baby than ever before. There is more pressure, therefore, to kind of get all the things right, from nutrition to behavior to learning to sports to socializing our kids. We want to do more for them. So we're asking more of parents with less of a village, less time, less support, less understanding. And so it's really kind of about that. That just doesn't work. We're sort of asking parents to be more and do more. There's so many stats, like parents these days are spending 50% more time with and for their kids than any previous generation. And that includes, like, the mum who was a stay-at-home mum in 1972. The mum now working full-time is spending more time with her kids than that stay-at-home mum was, right? So, and it's not like it's all wrong then or right now or vice versa. It's actually just having an understanding that the world, the context in which we parenting in has changed. So the village has changed, the information overload has changed the way we're parenting. But I reckon bigger than all of that, this is what's making parenting the hardest right now, and that is that we are doing it differently. As a result of the information, as a result of the pressure, as a result of the fact we're living and working differently, we're parenting in different ways. And the crux of it is we're trying to do a few key things a little bit different to the way that we were raised. For example, we're avoiding some of the really punitive discipline practices of the past. We're trying to be okay with our kids' feelings. We're trying to be more aware that those feelings are not terrible and they shouldn't be punished. And we're trying to do this. But that in itself is one of the most stressful parts of parenting, because you're essentially sitting with your child having a meltdown, or you're trying to hold a limit, or you're kind of trying to do that stuff without resorting to, violence or go to your room. And you're trying to do something different to the way that you're raised. So you're going off no rule book. And that in itself is super challenging. And that is within the broader context of we're all working, we're all juggling, we're under more financial pressure, our village has changed. And so it is a lot. The second part of that question was, well, what can we do to make it easier? Number one, we have to name it. Like I'll talk again and again about, parents are sinking. It's a lot. So we have to first of all acknowledge it's not that you're failing. It's not that you're a really crappy parent. It's that the ask is literally too much. And so I think if we can talk about that and acknowledge it, now we're in a better place to have a discussion about, well, what helps? In a really quick answer, what helps is, first of all, being kind to yourself. The absolute worst thing we can do, and we all do it, is sit on the couch and berate ourselves about the fact we dropped the balls or we fed the kids chicken nuggets or like whatever it is that we're kind of feeling like we just couldn't do more today, and we're really hard on ourselves, and that's not good for us and it's not good for our kids. And the parallel I'd give is, can you imagine a parent in 1984 sitting on the couch and going, oh, I don't think I welcomed enough feelings today? Like they were not doing that.
They definitely were not.
There was an ad on TV in the 1980s that would come on at 10 o'clock at night, and it would say, do you know where your kids are? Like that was the ad, because like they didn't even know if we were in the house or not. So I think the awareness and the self-compassion and the self-kindness, because if you're not being kind to yourself, if you can't even talk to yourself nicely, then we can't do, in terms of all the practical things we can do. We can outsource some stuff. We can go easier on ourselves. We can ask for help and use more of a village. There's lots of things we can start to do, but only once we acknowledge, I'm not feeling like this is too much because I'm a really bad parent, or I don't care about my kids, or my kids are terrible. This is feeling too much because the ask is too much. Now what can I do to dial down that pressure, because I'm worthy of that, I deserve that, and I'm being kind to myself? So that's kind of where I'd start.
Gosh, I love that. And I think that's just such a huge weight lifted and some reassurance for parents out there. And I know, for me, I was sharing before we started recording that I'm in the teen years with my kids. I've got a 15 and a 17-year-old, and I've come back to I feel like I need to learn I need to learn parenting all over again. But really what I need to do is look after myself so that I've got capacity to deal with whatever is thrown at me that particular day from my kids. And I know you say something similar, I've heard you talk about how confidence in parenting doesn't come from having all the answers. It comes from a strong connected relationship with your child. And maybe we can add on to that, making sure that you're well equipped, you're looking after yourself enough to hold that capacity. But can you talk more to this connection piece and why that's so important?
So I learned about connection in a true sense when my oldest two boys, so my eldest is 15 now too, and I was in the trenches raising them and trying my hardest to do a really good job. And I learned about the power of connection from Maggie Dent, who is sort of my mentor, and I think she's amazing. And it's about being intentional about the way we show love to kids. And what I didn't realize is that it's not enough to just tell kids we love them or do the things we do for them. We cook for them, we clean for them, we're constantly thinking of them, working for them. And we tell them we love them. And especially once they can talk back, we sort of think, well, they can just process that, right? But actually the concept of a parent's love is so abstract and so complicated and adult. I don't think our kids really understand that love, maybe until they have their own kids. It's a really long way off. And I learned that just with a thumbs up to my son, even on a day where he was being an absolute rat bag, I could make him feel delighted in for no reason, and that delight was this incredibly powerful thing that kind of made a kid that feels delighted in feels delightful. A kid that feels delightful goes better. So that's a little example of a thumbs up, or you go in for a surprise tickle attack with your kids just after bedtime and you kind of lower cortisol, you make them feel delightful. Kids that feel delightful go better. And we can also show this connection through just time, 10 minutes of fully focused special time between you and a child can reset behavior. And I'll tell a really quick story. But when I had my third son, my middle son started getting out of bed. So all kids will seek out us when they're struggling to adjust to something new. They don't walk up and say, hey, Mum, do you have enough love for me and the baby? What does this all mean for us? They get out of bed and they jump on their brother's head and they have you tearing your hair out. And I turned to my husband and I said, I think he's seeking connection. And he went, really? I think he needs to be put in the baby cot. But anyway, what we did was I took him out for a milkshake, and we were living in Brizzy. We were gone 20 minutes door to door. We had this little milkshake, and I remember sitting opposite him, and I'm trying to make chat, and he's just sitting like this. He's just and he's just grinning at me, and I couldn't get any chat going because he was grinning so hard. And I drove home. I thought, what was that grin all about? And on the way home, I went, oh my gosh, it was pride. He was out with no big brother, no baby, just him and me, and he felt amazing. We didn't talk about the getting out of bed, and I tell you without a word of a lie, he never got out of bed again. He just didn't get out of bed. It solved the problem. And so whenever there is a problem in my house, and I'm a bit like everybody, I whinge and I moan, I go, that kid needs to be taught a lesson. And then I stop and think, where do I start? I'm going to start with connection. And if you can find a way in, and it might be just a special code that means I love you. It might be just spotting one of your kids across the kitchen and winking. It does get more complicated when they're teenagers. And I just want to give you an update on that same child that happened recently. He's now 13. And I was having a whinge to my husband because he's getting a bit we're going into the grunting phase. And, he's a bit reluctant to help out around the house and a bit why me, blah, blah, blah.
Why do I have to do everything
Why do
around
I have
here?
to do it? My brothers do nothing. Anyway, I was having a whinge to my husband. I go, oh my God, 13-year-olds. And he took quite a lot of joy in saying this, as you can imagine. He goes, you know what he needs? He needs connection. And I'm like, oh. So I did. I knocked on his door. And what's he into now? He's into playing video games. So I knocked on his door and I said, can I join him? For 10 minutes, I played this video game with him. I wasn't very good at it. He laughed at me. He thought it was hysterical that I wanted to join in. But here's the miracle. We're washing up after dinner. I'm washing up after dinner, and he just appears next to me with a tea towel in his hand. One, right? That, trust me, that does not happen. And two, he turns to me and says, Mum, how was your day?
Oh,
I do not get asked about my day. Like, I do not get asked about, I just was like, how was my day?
wow.
And it just blew me away that even at 13, that same child from 3 to 13, just joining him in his world for 10 minutes. And that's all I did with the video game, 10 minutes. 10 minutes of my time going, you matter so much to me that I want to kind of learn about this thing I don't even really understand, and I'm willing to have a laugh. It makes them feel amazing. So, yeah, connection is a superpower.
And I love that there's all those examples you gave, like from we all like the idea, I think, of taking one of our kids out for a meal, like, and that doesn't always happen. I mean, if we can make time for that, awesome. But it can be, I love how you just said that simple, like, thumbs up across the room, or that simple immersing yourself in their interest. And I do think that that's applicable through all the years. But yeah, in the teenage years, I've found personally as well that that becomes more important because they're not interested in your world at all.
And with the teenage world, I mean, I joke, you've got to become like, you can be like a dog with little kids with connection. You can just like leap on them and just bound up to them and just delight in them. Now, if you do that to a teenager, they're going to be like, oh my God.
Not going to go well.
And so you've got to wait. You're like the cat. You're just sitting there and you're waiting. And if they come up and show you a bit of love, you just go, okay, all right, I'm here for it. But you just don't ever be too much. So I'm always kind of, if I get a bit of attention from my teen, I'm like, okay, I'm listening, I'm here, but I'm not to blow it.
Yes, and you do like it. I mean, yeah, so I've got an example yesterday. My son's right into fishing at the moment. My 17-year-old, he loves fishing. So he did this online ordered all this fishing stuff. I don't know how much stuff you need for fishing.
Oh, you need a lot.
Apparently there's so many different fishing rods you need. And anyway, his order came and he's so excited about this order coming. And he comes into the office. I was in the middle of a real big headache, like problem solving this big tech headache that we were having. And so I'm like, oh, but I stopped and I turned to him and he talked me through every lure and every hook that he just bought. But it was this moment of like this warm and fuzzy moment of connection. And I found like, again, like you said, you feel the remnants of that later. Like he came out of his room later and was talking to me more than he might otherwise. Yeah. So, it's just so powerful, isn't it?
It is, yeah, definitely.
Yes, thank you for sharing that. And, all those different ways that we can connect with our kids. And I think, so important. And I think it's really relevant for all age kids. So I would love to get your thoughts and advice on some of the big things or the common things that parents in our audience struggle with. So starting with meltdowns, like a big one for, again, probably all ages, but more the littler kids. Meltdowns can be a really tricky one for us to deal with as parents, particularly if we're in public. So can you give us some of your thoughts and ideas on what we can do in the moment of a meltdown as a parent, and maybe some things that can maybe prevent the meltdown from happening in the first place, or from so many meltdowns from happening in the first place?
Well, let's start with prevention and then let's move into what we do when World War III breaks out, because it's inevitable. So the first thing we want to know is that we don't actually want to prevent meltdowns, but totally understand that sometimes it'd be nice if they're a little bit less intense or they didn't last quite as long. So one of the things that can help in understanding sort of why meltdowns happen is to almost visualize kids have basically, you got this bottle of water, they've got that amount that they can kind of regulate through in a day before it blows and we're in meltdown town, right? And if your child is 2 years old and they're adjusting to being a big brother or sister, and also someone snatched off them in the playground today at daycare, then they're going to come home from school, they're already going to be at that meltdown zone. And that's not because they're lacking in resilience or there's something wrong with them. It's just that that cup is already full by the amount that they've got going on. And so when we can think of it in the way that kids will show up to 10 lower level emotions of increasing intensity before they blow. And a meltdown isn't always just crying on the floor screaming. A meltdown can be like really a child that's really silly, unable to listen, unable to stop. They're kind of going crazy and we're unable to kind of get them to stop and listen and do and kind of follow directions. A meltdown can be a child that's frozen. They can't join the party even if they're excited about it. And what we're looking at is the emotions have just tipped into a state of fight, flight, or freeze. So once we sort of know that they're building in lots of 10, we've got this incredible opportunity that I love to actually sort of lower the intensity of the next meltdown. Like it can prevent some meltdowns by doing this thing that feels counterintuitive of actually just sitting in the emotion of those lower level moments. So it might be that your kids all come to the dinner table at the end of the day, just like mine. Dinner is my Achilles heel. At least one of my kids will be like disappointed in what's for dinner. Or, you know, like just impossible that is not.
Disappointed is a nice way to put it.
Exactly. And so when they're little, that can be crying and tantruming and melting down because of dinner. And when they're old, it can be like, oh, not this again, you know. So absolutely, every night, somebody will be upset about dinner. Now, our instinct in the way we were parented is to jump straight to either punishment or bribery or threats. So we might say something like, just try it. And then if you have some, you can have a dessert or a yogurt. Or we might say, if you don't try it, there will be no TV later. That's a threat. We might chase them around with a spoon if they're little, sing and dance, whatever we do. And we have this incredible opportunity in this very everyday moment to kind of go, well, it might not be about the dinner. Right? It might be the build up of the day. It might be that something about the dinner is tricky or scary. So we've got this opportunity to come up to our child and put our arm around them and say, yeah, you're not loving dinner. You're disappointed. You know, you're disappointed the way dinner went, or you're disappointed that dad cut your toastie in half, or something about this meal is tricky today. And you've got this opportunity in that moment because your child is at that lower level emotion where they're still able to talk. We've got an opportunity then to, when we name it, we tame it. So we bring it from the back of the brain to the front of the brain, and we give our child this opportunity to feel seen and heard, like, yes. And often what can flow from that is an understanding of what else is behind that, because it's never just about the dinner. So recently I heard my husband in the kitchen with my son, and I heard my son just getting really, really upset because my husband had cut his toastie in half. He's like, you cut my toastie, and he's getting really upset. And I heard my husband eventually say, you're really upset because I cut your toastie. You did not want it cut. And he paused and then he said, and it's the first day back after the holidays. And I think it can be hard to go back after the holidays. And I heard my son go, yeah. And I walked out and my son was sitting at the table eating that toastie, no drama. So it's kind of understanding that we've got this incredible opportunity, but it's not in our programming to do that. Our programming says, I can feel a meltdown coming. I'm walking on eggshells. I'm just going to make that kid another toastie, or I'm going to like tell him to cut it out, or, you know,
or they're so, why are they so ungrateful? And
what's wrong with my children? And yet what they're doing is completely normal. They're actually pushing out to get some help with those emotions, and they will push and push and push all the way to the top. And though it feels like sometimes they go from 0 to 100, knowing that there are things happening, that we've got this opportunity, even a child refusing to put their shoes on, we've asked them 3 times and 17 times, and then we're snapping. And you can even view, you're not putting your shoes on. I've asked you 3 times. I'm going to come up, put my arm around my child and go, I can see that you're having a bit of trouble getting those shoes on today. And I'm wondering, is there something hard about it? Especially with younger children. Do you need a hand today? And we might just help them get the shoes on. But what we've probably done is lower that pressure in the valve. And we might find that they don't have such a big meltdown separating at the gate or whatever's coming next. So that is the idea of, if we can catch some of those lower level emotions, there are opportunity to coach. What do we do in the actual storm, in the eye of the storm? You know, there's so many ways to view it. But first of all, know this, there's no parent on the planet that feels good or in control or like they know what they're doing when their child is having a meltdown. There is no parent on the planet. It is an awful feeling. And the more out of control our kids are in the space of a meltdown, the more we feel panicked. And yet the problem with that is our role when a meltdown happens is to keep everybody safe. So our only role is to contain any behavior that is unsafe. So if your child is hitting or hurting others or themselves or damaging property, we definitely need to help them to contain that by saying, I'm not going to let you hit. I'm going to hold your hand. I'm not going to let you hit. And you're kind of just trying to say, hey, I can see you're not okay. I am here with you. I'm right here. And we're actually not saying much. And if your child is at a 10 out of 10, you're really imagining that you are riding a wave to the shore, or it might feel more like you're watching a train crash. And you can't stop that train. You can't stop that wave. And in fact, we want it to completely go out in order to have them like release that emotion fully. And then we find they often come into us. But really saying less, doing less, but letting your child know with all of your body, I love you, I'm not going anywhere, but really not with our words.
Yes, I love that. And it takes the pressure off, like just knowing that we cannot stop it. And our only job is to, keep people and property safe. And that's really all we can do. I think, it takes the pressure off a lot. So thank you so much for sharing those things. So much in there, but let's move on to the next one, which is bedtime struggles. So we see a lot of kids at Natural Super Kids that have struggle sleeping. They, take a long time winding down, or they're waking up through the night. So what can we do from your perspective to make bedtime as smooth as possible for kids?
So that's such a big question because we're talking about such a big range of ages. So obviously babies have a need to be near and comforted by their caregivers, and that's kind of a different area. Once kids are toddlers, the biggest thing I would say is that we need to feel safe to sleep. So really focusing on increasing safety, increasing connection can make all the difference. So really focusing on having some one-on-one time before that bedtime routine and making sure that kids have a really good sense of what happens in the routine. I love a bedtime like ritual or poster for young kids that has 3 steps of what we do, and we stick with it every night. There is a role of parents in toddlers and older kids in saying, I know you'd really like more water or a snack or more talk, and we're done with that for tonight because we've ticked off the 3 steps on our routine, and you're allowed to be upset about that, but it is bedtime now, and we kind of hold that limit. So that's kind of it in a general sense. But I would also say then, if you've got an audience with kids that are maybe that little bit older or even primary school aged and they're still struggling with sleep, we'd want to make sure that we checked out all the other factors that might be happening as well. So some kids have a sensory system that's just having a lot of trouble winding down, and we could look at weighted blankets, or for some kids having some earphones and something to listen to at night can be really settling. So always thinking, okay, if we're having a struggle to sleep and we've looked at safety and connection, what else could be going on here? Obviously you'd probably look at diet, but we're on a really interesting personal journey recently because our youngest child has always troubled to go to sleep and stay asleep and often bounces into our bed, and he's just a really restless sleeper. And we've wound up looking into airway health because he snores.
Huge one with sleep, isn't it?
Yeah, so we're currently having treatment, and it wound up getting picked up that our 13-year-old also needed treatment. And it's really interesting. They're both our kids that have struggled with sleep the whole way. And this is just information we didn't have 15 years ago.
It's not the thing. It's not something, I think there's more and more awareness about it, and we talk about it a lot, like, airway health and how that can affect sleep and other things. But I think the awareness is growing, thank goodness. But
I now know 50% of kids have limited airway health or problems with airway health. And both of our boys, they snore a bit, which I now know is not normal.
It's kind of cute when they're little and babies and snoring, isn't it?
Yes. It's adorable. And the big open mouth sleeping. So we're sort of now aware of that. And so I'm always like, no matter what behavior I'm working with parents on, like many kids will struggle with toilet training, for example. They'll really have trouble. They might nail the wheeze, but really struggle with fear around doing a poo on the toilet. And we definitely want to look at, well, how do we increase connection and safety and help that child tackle that fear of doing something new? But at the same time, we've always got to also look at the physical body. Well, let's just make sure everything's working properly, make sure there's no constipation, get their gut sort of looked at by someone as well. So it's always looking at the whole picture of the whole child.
Yes, you're definitely talking our language, and that's what I love talking to people like you, because it's very complementary to the sorts of things that we offer, which are, is help with things like constipation and gut imbalances that can link to lots of these things that we're talking about. But going back to the connection piece for bedtime, I think that is so key. Obviously, my kids are older now, but my daughter was she just wanted us there for years and years and years. Like, we would have to lay with her when she went to sleep, and she would be like, 1 more minute, 1 more story, 1 more song, 1 more minute, 1 more rub. I miss that little 1 more minute now that she's 15.
Yeah, she no longer needs.
The thing that really helped us is, just more connection prior to bedtime, was a game changer for us. So,
and I'd also say to some people, sometimes what needs to happen prior to bedtime is a bit of an emotional release.
Yes.
And it's very connected. But my son, when he was sort of adjusting to preschool, he used to sort of sometimes walk out into the kitchen. He'd look at us all eating dinner and he'd say, I'm just going to have an ice cream from the freezer. And I'd say, well, no, you're not. It's dinner time, because it was my 4th. It wasn't my first rodeo. He'd be like, well, I am. I know where the freezer is. So I'm just over here. I'm getting it. And so and we're in boundary zones. So I'd be between my son and the freezer saying, my answer is no, we're not having an ice cream, but I can see you having a really hard time. I know how much you want one, and this is really tough. And he'd be back arching off the freezer door. He'd have this massive emotional release. And then we'd have a cuddle, and he'd usually sit up at the table and eat his dinner and go to bed. And it would always happen after the 3 days of preschool. And what I know, or what I've noticed, is sometimes kids will push for that release earlier in the day, like at dinner time. And if they don't get it, if we cave on everything, or we don't kind of hold space for that kind of boundary that needs to happen, then it is going to happen at bedtime, because your child hasn't had that chance to actually release. And so it's only when you snap and walk out and say, that's it, no more books, they have a big cry, and then they go to sleep and we feel terrible. But actually they were seeking that the whole way. So sometimes it's like, look, I love this. You look at your child in any moment and you go, are you okay, or are you not okay? And if they're not okay, we need to go towards them. Like, we need to physically go towards that child. And maybe it's a boundary, or maybe it's empathy, or maybe it's connection. We need to just go, you're not okay. We're going to spend 10 minutes playing together. And we really focus on that for 10 minutes, knowing that we're kind of putting something in place that's going to help whatever comes next go that little bit better.
Such a good insight. I'm sure lots of parents will really resonate with that one. And because we're busy and we're tired at that time, and some parents might be like, whatever, have the ice cream.
And you're totally allowed to do that too. You're totally allowed. And the question I get parents to sort of ask themselves is this, you might have a child and they're wanting a biscuit, and you're thinking it's almost dinner time. The answer is no. And then your child starts to get really upset. Are you allowed to change your mind? I think the question we ask ourselves is this working for me? Is this working for my child? And often we have quite a clear answer. So you might very, very clearly think, you know what, this might work for me today. I have a newborn that needs to be fed, or I have a work deadline, and this might just get us through to dinner in one piece, and I'm just going to let this happen. And so you take a deep breath and say, you know what, I've heard you. You really want one. Let's do a biscuit, one more, and then no more. And then other times you're going to think, would this work for me? Would this work for my child? And you think, no, I'm not going to feel, I've cooked this dinner. I know they won't eat it if I say no now. I know that I need to just push through this limit. It doesn't work for me for them to have the biscuit. And that's when we hold the line.
Yeah, I love that. You're allowed to change your mind. And then on the flip side, though, if you are just kind of not holding that boundary, then that like you were saying before, that can prevent them from having that emotional release, which can lead to issues later and later in the night as well.
That's
so
exactly right, because it's always coming for us. Like, it's
you can't avoid it. it's gonna come out regardless.
Yeah.
Yes. Oh, so good. And then lastly, what about fussy eating? So we obviously have our own approach to fussy eating, mostly from sort of a health perspective. There's so many different strategies you can use for fussy eaters out there. Like from a naturopathic perspective, we're looking at, potential nutrient deficiencies that can lead to kids being fussier with food, gut imbalances that can lead to kids being fussier with food. But I'd love for you to share your tips from a parenting perspective. How do we deal with those fussy eaters?
A little bit like bedtime, we have to know that if kids don't feel safe, they're not going to feel hungry. So there's so many great strategies, and I have had an extremely fussy eater. So I've tried them all. I've finger painted with sausages. I have done everything. But really understanding at a fundamental level that we just can't get anywhere with those strategies if we don't start with connection and safety. So a couple of little strategies for people sort of in this area that I would sort of think about is, number one, getting your child to either move or do something to regulate the system just before you sit down to eat. So for little kids, wheelbarrow races up and down the hallway just before you call them in to wash their hands for dinner is going to put proprioceptive input into the top of the body. It's going to have them much more able to sit for 9 minutes and maybe get some of that nutrition in. It might also be just connection, just a little bit of connection, letting them bring their favourite toy to the table, letting them make a little seat up for their favourite toy. And we can say to their favourite toy, do you like peas? Oh, I'm going to try my peas, So bringing a bit of fun and humour, because that lowers cortisol. But knowing that our kids really are always, until they're 15, but until then, they are seeking us in 24/7. And so if we can focus on making mealtimes a place of connection and lightness and humour and low cortisol, they want to be there, and they're much more likely to feel safe enough to try new food. So that's always where I start. But then my underpinning philosophy, and I don't know if it's sort of what you do, but I love the division of responsibility.
Yes, we talk about that a lot as well. Yeah.
So that helps you with kind of what you can and can't control, and it helps you with those boundaries that are kind of come into it. So learning that you're controlling what you bring into the house, when you eat, how you lay it out onto the table, but your child is completely in control of if and what and how much they try, and not stepping into the lane of what they are in control of, which is like impossible to do, because we all want to say, just have a try.
Just eat the broccoli.
Damn broccoli. So I know it. I struggle with it, and I know it, and I struggle with it. So I find that it's helpful though. It brings me back into my lane. When I'm feeling it all get too much, I know that I've lost that division of responsibility. I'm either too much in their lane or I've got them too much in my lane. And that kind of helps to know, look, we're in charge of what we bring in and what we're presenting. Always trying to have a safe food on the table for that fussy eater. I've had some luck with not ready to try it bowls so that they can move it off their plate, and really thinking about trying as a broader thing than just food in mouth and swallowed. A trying can be just tolerating it on your plate, just touching it, just smelling it, lowering that expectation, because again, always when we are expecting, when we're pressuring, we are upping that cortisol. So kids are spiking, and then once that cortisol is up, our kids are not hungry. So we're losing those hunger cues, and that's why it matters so much.
Yes, and that's very in line with the sorts of things that we talk about. And I've got a podcast episode, I can't remember what number it is, but I'll make sure it's linked in the show notes, like on the division of responsibility, where we talk more about that. And what did you call it? The not ready to try it plate. I've called it the learning to like plate. So this is just to let people know it's like a separate plate that kids can, take the food off of their plate, their main plate, because some kids just do not want that food anywhere near them. There's no pressure to eat, like you're saying. They can smell it, they can lick it. But it's there. That counts as an exposure, if it's just sort of sitting there. And one thing I wanted to add is I think parents get too focused on dinner time, like we're trying to get all the good nutrients in at dinner time. And that's often the worst time. Kids are tired, we're tired. So that can go downhill pretty quickly. So try and look at when your kids are most motivated to eat. Often that could be like after school or when they're coming home from wherever they've been for the day, or some kids even breakfast time, and try and get more nutritious foods in at those times as opposed to trying to fit all the veggies in at dinner time.
Yeah, so true. And many times over the years, I've actually flipped my afternoon tea and dinner because I found the kids were just ravenous, especially at times when kids are going through changes in sleep schedule or adjusting to kindy or whatever. And I would feed them their main meal at 3 o'clock,
yes,
or 3:30 when they walked in the door. And then I'd just offer a snack plate and yogurt
later
at night. And that, definitely being flexible and looking at when they're eating and taking that pressure off dinner. And especially for those parents with kids who are at a daycare that cooks a meal for lunch, like they get so stressed that their child's not eating dinner. And I'm like, mate, they've had a 3-course meal. They're having dinner. Give that kid a piece of toast and call it a day.
Exactly. That's so true. That's really important to consider, because if they've had that big main meal at lunchtime, then they don't need, like some sort of snack plate is going to be more than enough for dinner.
Totally.
Yeah. So good. So good. I could sit here and talk to you for hours and hours, but I know you're a busy lady. So let our listeners know a bit more about your book and where they can find out more about you.
Yeah, so my book is called Little People, Big Feelings. I wrote it last year, and it's designed to be the book that I wished was on my bedside for the first 10 years of my parenting. Everything in there does apply to older kids, and particularly if you have a big-hearted kid, you will know if you have one. This book is for you. And I'm also on Instagram at Connected Parenting AU, and I've got a website, connectedparenting.com.au, and I do one-on-one consults, workshops. I have online products as well as the book.
Amazing. We will make sure all of those links are in the show notes. And I'd highly recommend people come and follow you on Instagram. You share some really helpful tips in your Instagram little videos. So definitely go and check out Connected Parenting on Instagram. Thank you so much for joining me, Jen. It's been lovely to chat with you.
Thanks so much for having me on.
Thank you so much for joining me on the podcast today. Head on over to our website, naturalsuperkids.com, for the show notes for this episode, as well as a whole heap of inspiration to help you raise healthy and happy kids. I'll see you next week.